Today, Jamaica achieves the most advanced constitution of any territory in the West Indies. Within our federal system, we are a completely self-governing country except for external affairs and defense. The British government has surrendered all the reserved powers by virtue of which laws made by our Parliament could have been rejected by the Governor or the Secretary of State. Our civil service is now completely under our own control. So too our finances and the machinery of justice and for the enforcement of law. So we have come to the end of an era, and we begin at the first page of the first chapter of the book of our freedom.
Norman Manley, Jamaican farm boy, Rhodes Scholar, barrister, leader of Jamaica's first modern political party.
Manley had campaigned over the years for federation and independence for the British colonies of the Caribbean.
After 2 terms as opposition party in government, the People's National Party, headed by Norman Manley, had won the national elections in 1955.
In 1957, the English-speaking colonies in the Caribbean were officially linked in the Federation of the British West Indies. And in 1959, the People's National Party once again were victorious in the Jamaican national elections.
Norman Manley was still driven by a dream of federation of the British Caribbean, and in 1961 he went to England for talks with the British colonial secretary.
I'm looking right up, as far as I can see, towards parade and even beyond, up the vast lines of cheering people and the double lines of uniformed policemen with steel helmets, because although there's going to be a very vociferous welcome for the Premier here, it's also a pretty controversial occasion because the Jamaica Labour Party is here in force with their anti-federation banners. The PNP supporters on the other side of the street are...
So you're not going to go in if you try to ride your bicycle in the mud like you're going to hospital?
The road needs to fix.
Man, listen now.
Now there's a large squad of police coming.
Come on, they go talk now.
And there are tens of thousands of good Jamaicans and good West Indians come out to greet us. And I say, yeah! And I say thanks from the bottom of my heart. I know that there has been a disorderly but not very large crowd trying to disrupt the proceedings of this meeting. We are aiming to become a civilized and respected nation in the world as the Federation of the West Indies. It is no part of the civilized practices of the world to seek to organize violence in the streets.
The ruling People's National Party, the Governor of Jamaica, and Alexander Bustamante of the opposition Jamaica Labour Party had agreed that federation was a good thing.
But it wasn't that simple. Would a central federal government take power away from politicians who preferred to be large frogs in their own small ponds? Who should shoulder the responsibilities? And how could every territory be sure of an equal piece of the pie?
I think really the time of the federal dream was probably the most passionate I ever saw my grandfather. He had a huge excitement. There were always maps and there were always plans, and he was always talking about it, and people were always coming and going, and he was always traveling, and everything was this federal dream.
He put it in these words.
When we wanted to shine in the world as cricketers, we built up a West Indies cricket team. When we wanted a university to teach our sons to become leaders in a free nation, we built a West Indian university. When we wanted to trade sugar, bananas or citrus, we combined together in a West Indian organization. And I went abroad and negotiated not as a Jamaican, but as a West Indian for the future markets for those crops.
Election to the federal parliament were on party lines. The People's National Party and other parties with socialist and liberal leanings formed the West Indies Federal Labour Party, led by Norman Manley.
The Jamaica Labour Party joined with those of more conservative agendas as the Democratic Labour Party, led by Bustamante. But when it was decided that the capital of the new group would be in Trinidad, Manley decided not to run as a candidate in the federal election. He felt he was needed more at home.
I think the greatest mistake was made when Norman Manley himself decided not to go to the Federation. He was well respected and everybody was anxious to follow him.
The party, led by Manley, won the majority of the seats in the federal parliament.
The whole matter exploded when in May 1960, Bustamante formally announced his party's opposition to federation. Norman Manley decided that since so many Jamaicans were not in agreement, the principal thing to do was to hold a national referendum on whether or not Jamaica should withdraw from the federation.
There was nothing in the Constitution to tell him to do that. And I personally, the only thing I have never forgiven him is for that. That he should have really gone to the people.
Oh, such a bright man. Should do such a fool thing.
But to him the thought that the Jamaica people should have the right to express their democratic will as to whether to go into the Federation or not was like a law of life to him. It was so profoundly bound up with his belief that you can't, shall I say, compromise with democracy.
And the Jamaican people voted to leave federation and to go it alone.
Even in defeat, that their right to have chosen was more important than whether he won.
I remember the night he lost the federation, his huge silence. He had the flag folded on the table and I came up to him and I said, well, have we lost power? And he took out this flag and he unfolded it. I remember he wrapped it around me like a shawl and pulled me to him. He said, never forget this flag. And I never did.
But what of Manley's dream for independence for Jamaica? Manley and Bustamante would soon be off to London to negotiate a constitution for an independent Jamaica.
When the photographers were satisfied and the world's newspapers had recorded the occasion, Mr. Manley left the airport for the 12-mile journey to the capital itself. Ahead lay the most important few days of his life, the days that would shape the future of his country and bring to reality the hopes of the people he served. February the 1st, 1962, a date which school children will be taught to remember for generations to come. It was the day that saw the beginning of a new chapter in Jamaica's 450 years of recorded history. Since the war, few of any countries have enjoyed such astonishing advances in the field of economic development. This, coupled with maturity in political life and thought, had made it possible for Jamaica to face independence with confidence.
This independence conference marks the beginning of the end of a very long road. The road ends, Mr. Secretary, at a time when all empires decline, when colonialism has become a word of ugly meaning, when the sun sets round the world chiefly on the flags of free peoples, with whom we hope soon to walk in peace and friendship. Any country that can weld into a harmonious unity the sort of heritage we possess, where people drawn from England and Europe and Africa and all the nations of the East are mingled and mixed in every combination that one can conceive, makes a contribution, by example, to another great problem of the world. But I find it a great moment of pride to come here today surrounded by men from both the great political parties of my country, jointly with them and with you, to determine the questions which this conference will answer, in order that we may pass through the gate at the end of the road to our own independence as a nation.
The press admitted to witness the most historic scene of all, the signing of the report of the conference, which was an agreement of independence. Independence on August the 6th, 1962. It was a moment of triumph for the delegates from Jamaica.
As time goes on, Mr. Secretary, and indeed before many months, if not weeks, have passed, you may well look back on this occasion with nostalgic recollections of the goodwill and friendliness that has prevailed, not only between your government and mine, but as well between us all here, who, though we fight in our own home for our own purposes, find it natural to combine where the future of our country is concerned.
The new Jamaican flag would be raised in August of 1962. But Norman Manley felt duty-bound to call general elections immediately. Would the people who had rejected his dream of federation want him to lead them into independence? The election was held in April, and the People's National Party was defeated.
One of the qualities that perhaps is being overlooked for the moment was the extraordinary strength of his belief in the democratic process, the strength of his belief in the right of people to choose, and his amazingly philosophical willingness to accept the choices even when they were contrary to what he would have wished and maybe sometimes defeated him.
It was ironic. Norman Manley had been the most tireless advocate for independence, but somebody else would be the national leader of the newly independent Jamaica.
Right! General salute! Reserve!
They got to come with great dignity to Jamaica nation. That will be read and we go to meet them with great pomp and style. Legally we'll greet them.
Beautiful. It was wonderful to see the Jamaican flag. But I felt a little sad because I felt that the person who should be raising the flag was the person who was Manley, you know.
After 1962, the political climate seemed to have changed. Violence erupted, and the political tribalism emerged.
I hate all forms of unfair pressure, of corrupt uses of power, of victimizing people, denying them the right to live because they don't share your political calling. I abominate fraud and dishonesty in all its guises and forms, no matter how it may dress itself up or don an air of innocence to conceal the nasty thing that is below.
Norman Manley once wrote, "The past has attempted to destroy the influence of the glory that is Africa. It has attempted to make us condemn and mistrust the vitality, the vigor, the emotionalism that we get from our African ancestors."
Norman Manley stood almost alone among his colleagues because he felt that the Rastas had a cause. And it had nothing to do with color. It was beyond that. We were talking about injustice, social justice, and, as I said, the obscenities of colonialism.
Malman and Crabnether Shoal and all of those people had this idea that they should finance the early activities of the PNP themselves. This means that they got themselves into very serious financial problems.
In the end, beloved Drumbler had to be sold for £30,000 to help to pay his debts.
Meanwhile, Maddy had built this little house regardless, on a toehold of Drumbler land. Everyone said it was madness, but Maddy had this nagging intuition that something would come and that it would be needed. I found my grandfather out under the almond tree there, and he was looking out over the gully to where Drumbler was on the other side, and there was a droning noise of a bulldozer, and they were tearing down Drumbler. You could see huge hunks of the house coming out, a whole shoulder of the house, I remember, just coming out. It was just, and he looked so sad, you know. I said, "Pa, come inside, don't look at that, come inside." And he said, "It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference."
In 1967, the People's National Party again lost the election. And two major players on the political stage would soon make their final bows. In February 1967, Alexander Bustamante retired from politics.
6 months later, Norman Manley also stepped down.
I have finally decided that I will not again stand for election as party leader or party president. My generation had a distinct mission to perform. It was to create a national spirit with which we could identify ourselves as a people for the purpose of achieving independence on the political plane. I am convinced, deeply convinced, that the role of this generation is to proceed to the social and economic reforms of Jamaica.
But retirement didn't sit well with Norman. His health began to fail, and somehow he seemed to have lost that great lust for life.
Because there really wasn't anything particularly wrong with him other than that he was getting old. But my grandmother always felt rather sentimentally that he was dying of a broken heart. My father thought he was dying of boredom.
He kept telling Mrs. Manley that he had to catch a train, that the train was, you know, leaving. She said, "But Norman, there's no train. What are you talking about?" And he said, no, the train is going. I have to catch the train.
I suppose that symbolically, if you like, this is where he's saying he'd had enough.
Norman Manley, a lawyer, died without even leaving a will?
When you were with Norman Manley, you had no desire for wealth. The whole purpose of life was to see how you could help the dispossessed, the less fortunate, you know, and see how you could put them on a pedestal or a launching pad that they could rise.
When Norman Manley died, of course, one of the very important things that had to be done was to find out and figure out how the country was going to recall and remember his contribution to society. And in that sense, what happened at that time was that they created the Norman Manley Foundation. And the idea behind the Norman Manley Foundation was initially to create the Norman Manley Award for Excellence and to try to develop other activities that would help to keep his name and his contribution to Jamaica in the forefront.
He was a great parliamentarian. He really was. And he, of course, again was brought up in the tradition where Parliament was the important, iconic core of democratic governance.
He imbued the Jamaican people with the spirit of independence and imbued us all with the with the power to feel that we could take our destiny in our own hands, and made us proud to be Jamaicans.
He believed in the West Indian people. He believed in Jamaicans. He believed in our capacity for greatness, and for all things, the capacity to do anything the world could do, even as people from a small group of islands.
I think that Mr. Manley was somebody who created a level of honesty, integrity, brilliance, dedication to what you believe in.
He was the type of man, he didn't just believe something, he would believe it, and he would follow it up with 50 years of dedication, hard work and service, either to effect it or to prove the theory true.
We called him the father of the nation, and this is what he was.
Norman Washington Manley had been made a national hero of Jamaica in 1970.
Time was when men went out because they had a new hope. Here I ask you to go out because you have a new hope. Go out among the people and teach them. Go out among the young men and encourage them and give them hope. Be pioneers in the land. Disempower yourself. Build for a new Jamaica caucus. I give you the challenge. I give you the task.
There is a fine old Jamaica greeting. I end with it. Walk good, everybody. Walk good.
We will, sir. We will. We little, but we talawa.
A very principled human being. Warm, but a very stern exterior. And a man of tremendous capacity in every sense of the word. Athlete, scholar, lawyer, social worker, politician, statesman.
He had a passionate belief that there was no substitute for hard work.
His legacy meant a lot to me during my entire career in track and field.
Jamaica welfare, and that was, I think, the greatest movement of nationalism and people building and community building that this country has ever seen.
He gave away all that he had, and he was, as I said, like the master. He was ready to walk along the rugged road with the dust and be a part of what the suffering. That is why he understood the suffering of the poor man.
You know, he put the products of the, or rather the exercise of the creative imagination as part and parcel of the self-government movement.
People believed him, and people accepted when he, put forward a program, a policy, or what have you. This was coming from sincerity and honesty and having researched the problem.
Well, he certainly has left a legacy of the importance of integrity in public life.